We're at the Sawmill Trailhead today in Lee Canyon. There's Mummy's Head. We're going to see a lot of that. That's our main reference point. And today we're doing the Blue Tree Trail. One of the great things about the Blue Tree Trail is that it's going to take us down into Lee Canyon Narrows. Lee Canyon Narrows is a beautiful canyon wash with towering walls on either side. Now we're starting out on the Sawmill Trail. The Sawmill Trail will then connect with the Blue Tree Trail, and we'll show you some other connections as we go. So we're going to take the Blue Tree Trail in a clockwise direction. So here we are taking the first turn on the Sawmill Trail. If you were doing the Sawmill Trail counterclockwise, you would take that turn I just took. Beautiful pine forest. A lot of shade. It's actually the 4th of July weekend. So the temperatures down in the Las Vegas Valley are about 102, 103 today. It should be a comfortable, maybe high of 76. So when the temperatures get up to 110 or above in the Las Vegas Valley, that's when this altitude begins to become a bit uncomfortable and where you might want to head up to Mummy's Head, Mount Charleston, the higher elevations. Okay, continuing along, and we started at the Hikers Trailhead. There are 2 trailheads in the Sawmill Trailhead area. The upper trailhead is for hikers and picnickers, and the lower trailhead, which is only about, I don't know, 50 yards from the upper trailhead. The lower trailhead is the equestrian trailhead. And by the way, the Sawmill Trail is the main equestrian trail. If you hire an outfit to take you on a horseback ride up at the Sawmill Trailhead, chances are you will be circling this sawmill loop. And I've got a video on that on LasVegasAreaTrails.com. Awesome experience. Okay, let's continue. And by the way, as I mentioned, Mummy's Head is the all-pervasive reference point for all the sawmill loop trails. There are 6 loop trails, and there's Mummy's Head. If you go in the direction of Mummy's Head, you're going to come across the Sawmill Trailhead and Lee Canyon Road. And the reason this is important is that these trails, though they are color-coded, the trail signs are often missing the color code you want. For example, I'm technically on part of the Blue Tree Trail. You didn't see any blue at the trailhead. And if you were going to one of the other loops, the largest loop, the green coated Mud Springs loop, you wouldn't see any green till you get further out. If you're going on the red coated Pinyon Pine loop, you wouldn't see any red until you get further out on the trail. If you're going on the Rocky Gap loop or the Deer Creek Catch Pen loop, you're not going to see any trail signs for those trails. So you get out onto the trails, and there are some off-splitting rabbit trails that look kind of like the trail that you're on, you begin to get confused. Am I on the main trail or am I on one of these rabbit trails? And you can get all turned around. Well, if that happens, just look for Mummy's Head. That'll get you back to the Sawmill Trailhead. Okay, onward. Now we're coming up to an important intersection. Here's where the Sawmill Trail intersects with the Blue Tree Trail. So now you see the first blue trail indicators, and you've got a choice here. You can head to the right, and that'll take you on the counterclockwise Blue Tree Loop. You can head to the left for the clockwise Blue Tree Loop. And look at this. See, there's a little green here. It's been covered up. Green is for Mud Springs Loop. So, yeah, things are not always really clear, but if once you get to know the colors, that helps. Okay, so one other choice you've got here is you can head, like I mentioned, in the counterclockwise direction. That also takes you to the equestrian trailhead. And then here is the trail that we were just on, Sawmill Trail, looping back to the Sawmill Trailhead. So what we're going to do now is take the Blue Tree Trail in a clockwise direction. So we're taking a left at this first intersection, and here we go. I'm not a botanist, but I'm going to give you the main trees that you're going to see, at least the ones that I know of. Here is a pinyon pine, a lot of pinyon pine. And then here is a mountain mahogany. Notice the curled leaves that are curled in order to keep the, the leaves from losing moisture. It gets very hot up here. And then, here's a little shrub. This is called Mormon tea. So these are the few of the plants that you're going to see, the main plants you're going to see along the trail. There's also juniper, which is just amazing. Some of the junipers grow very tall, and some of the most beautiful junipers, and a lot of them have berries on them. We'll look at that in a bit. I don't see any right around here. You look ahead and you can see a ridge ahead. If you were to just go off trail and climb up over that ridge, you would end up at Black Rock Sister. Well, first you'd cross the Max Canyon Road, then you'd continue up to Black Rock Sister, North Sister, and South Sister. On the other hand, yeah, there's Mummy's Head again, letting us know where the trailhead is. So, yeah, we'll see a juniper in a bit. Well, you can correct me, but I believe this is a variety of juniper. And one thing that may give it away is the stringy bark, which, by the way, makes great fire starter if you're in the wilderness and it's cold, you need a fire, and just rub the stringy bark together, turn it into a kind of stringy powder, and it makes a great fire starter. But you definitely don't want to be doing that today in this area. And there's another one. And just notice the look of this tree as opposed to the other variety of juniper I'll show you in a bit. Oh, here it is. And you see there are berries on it. So another variety of juniper. If I were a botanist, I'd tell you exactly what variety. Okay, more reference points. As I've mentioned, yeah, there's Mummy's Head. And over here, the ridge that would lead you toward the Sisters. But here's another reference point. Notice this ridge over in this direction. And you see how it heads down to the left toward a kind of saddle. And that saddle is the low point between this ridge and the ridge that leads to the Sisters. At that saddle low point is the trailhead for the Mud Springs Loop, 15-mile loop, longest loop in the Sawmill Trail system. And over this ridge is the entire loop. Beautiful loop. And also the Pinyon Pine loop, red loop, can be accessed over this ridge. But here we are on the Blue Tree Loop, continuing around, show you the next great intersection. And here we are coming up on the next intersection. This is where Sawmill Loop heads off to the left. And notice there's green here, indicating that yes, you can get to the Mud Springs Loop in this direction, but it's not the shortest way up to Mud Springs Loop. Now, on the other hand, if you take a right at this intersection, you're continuing on the Blue Tree Loop. There's a little green indicator for Mud Springs, and it's partially covered, as you can see. This is really not the best way to get to the Mud Springs Loop, but you could navigate the trail system and reach Mud Springs Loop in this direction. Notice also there's red indicating the Pinyon Pine Loop Trail. And so you're on a combination right now of the Blue Tree Loop and the Pinyon Pine Loop. You're on the Blue Tree Loop in a clockwise direction, Pinyon Pine Loop in a counterclockwise direction. And as these trails begin to split off, the further you get from the Sawmill Trailhead, the trails become a little more clear. They're most confusing where they all converge in places like this last intersection I just showed you. So even though they're less confusing, less signs, less intersections, as you get further out, there are less signs. And so you can go for miles without seeing any trail sign indicator. And look at this juniper. Both of these, just amazing. Pinyon pine, juniper with berries. And I guess they are edible, but you really want to do some study before you start popping them into your mouth. And look at this juniper. No berries, but just beautiful. Okay, onward. Notice we are descending on this trail, and we'll descend to a low point and then cross Lee Canyon Road. The trail runs parallel to Lee Canyon Road, which is right over in this direction at the base of this rise ahead. So the trail runs parallel to Lee Canyon Road, crosses the road, and at that point descends into the Lee Canyon Narrows, which are just at the base of this ridge that I pointed out just a moment ago. And once we enter Lee Canyon Narrows, then the trail loops back toward the Sawmill Trailhead. As we continue to descend parallel to Lee Canyon Road, watch for a change in the terrain, in the plant life. It's going to become a lot drier the lower we go and more desert-like. Yeah, there's that ridge that's just above Lee Canyon Narrows. Lee Canyon Road is on this side of the Narrows. Mummy's Head, letting us know where the trailhead is. But yeah, watch for the change in terrain as we descend. Pretty cool. The trail has momentarily ascended to a high point. Few things to see here. One is the all familiar Mummy's Head, but there's a lot more. Over in this direction, you can see approximately at that bend is the desert overlook on Deer Creek Road. And over here, Angel Peak, Air Force radar installation. And then you can see the ridge in the foreground. And this ridge is the ridge on the other side of Lee Canyon Narrows. And Lee Canyon Road would be on this side of the Narrows. One more reference point is the Blue Tree Group Camp, which is right down in this area. So again, the reason I point out all these reference points is if you happen to get turned around, you head in the direction of one of these reference points. If you really needed water, you'd head down to the Blue Tree Camp and find that. And here we are looking back up the trail and continuing down the Blue Tree Loop in a clockwise direction. Okay, here's the next large intersection. Well, the next intersection actually. And you can see Blue Tree Loop continues in this direction on this road. If you were to head down this little trail, you end up toward Lee Canyon Road and the Blue Tree Group Camp. On the other hand, if you head up the road, you're going to cross through the Pinyon Pine Loop, and you could take a right at the top of this road, and that'll put you on Pinyon Pine Loop in a clockwise direction. Or if you want to do Pinyon Pine in a counterclockwise direction, this little unmarked trail will do that for you. So just to let you know where you are, and if you wanted to head up this road to the top of the ridge, not only would you take a right to continue on the Pinyon Pine Loop, but you would go straight to head on to the Mud Springs Loop, which is the green coated loop. Now, one more thing to note is, remember I mentioned Pinyon Pine Loop counterclockwise, this unmarked direction. This will also take you to the beginning of the Rocky Gorge Loop. It's up a mile or so, and that would put you on Rocky Gorge Loop in a clockwise direction. So there you have it, this somewhat confusing intersection. We just came out this trail which is Blue Tree. We're continuing on the main road, not heading down, and continue on the main road continues us on the Blue Tree Loop, though you will not see signs for some time that say anything about Blue Tree Loop. And a great reference that will help is, again, the terrain. Blue Tree Group Camp down in this direction. You can see it below. Lee Canyon Road just beyond, and then beyond Lee Canyon Road, the Lee Canyon Narrows, which are at the base of this ridge you see below us. And then, of course, if you're totally confused, just head for Mummy's Head and you'll reach the Sawmill Trailhead. That'll get you back home. Okay, continuing on. The Blue Tree Loop, in spite of only seeing green. Oh, wait a minute. It's green, but there is a little note on here. Blue Tree Loop. Now, we can't guarantee that little tape is going to be there in the future. It's not very permanent. So that's another reassurance that yes, this is the Blue Tree Loop till that tape ends up disintegrating, disappearing. Okay, onward. And one quick note that I'm going to add at this point is that I do really well in the wilderness where I'm just following the ridges and the mountain peaks and using those as guidance. When I try to stay on a particular trail, that just totally throws me off. So that's a whole nother skill set, I think, is trail finding. Anyway, yeah, let's continue. Let's hope we're heading in the right direction. And one more quick note. If you wanted to find the Rocky Gorge loop in a counterclockwise direction, you continue to the lower end of this Blue Tree Loop, and then we'll show you where that intersection is. So Rocky Gorge loop in a clockwise direction, you would take that little Pinyon Pine trail that was unmarked that I mentioned. That would send you ultimately to Rocky Gorge in a clockwise direction. This will put you on Rocky Gorge Loop in a counterclockwise direction. But we are on the Blue Tree Loop for now. Okay, we've been on this road, and that is the Blue Tree Loop. And you can see, oh, look at this, Max Peak, another reference point. Awesome. And there you can see better view of the sisters. And of course, Mummy's Head. Okay, the road takes a turn here, or an intersection. This, again, heads down to the Blue Tree Group Camp, which is below. Do not go in that direction. Continue straight, and there is indeed a sign that lets you know, plus a little cairn, lets you know that you continue straight to continue on the Blue Tree Loop. So that's nice that there's some reassurance here that we are on track. As we continue on this Blue Tree Loop, now a road, another view opens up below. Beautiful desert terrain. That would be the Highway 95 corridor down there. And if you were to plop yourself right in the middle of that desert terrain and then take a hard right, you would end up at the Sheep Range and ultimately Las Vegas. The left would take you toward Reno. Onward. Okay, now the desert environment below is totally opening up. You see a lot more. So beautiful. Look at the change from the green of the trees, vegetation, to the desert terrain, barren. That's toward the Reno direction. Highway 95 heading up toward Reno. Here you've got Lee Canyon Road below, and that heads straight down toward, there's the Sheep Range. And then over here, the Pointy Gas Peak, which is directly over the upper end of Decatur Boulevard in Las Vegas. So there you have it. How beautiful this terrain. Let's take a closer look. And of course, you notice the change in vegetation. This is all about conserving water in this desert environment. And you'll notice as we go lower, as we continue to descend on the Blue Tree Loop, you'll notice the trees are getting shorter. That's to conserve water. You don't want to be really tall, have a whole lot of surface for evaporation, and have a higher need for water. So you're going to get shorter, and eventually there will be Joshua trees, yucca, and cacti. And then in this direction again, Max Peak, beautiful limestone peak. Challenge to climb. And then again, our reference point toward the trailhead is Mummy's Head. So there you have a view of where we stand at this moment. Let's continue down the Blue Tree Loop Trail, which is now a road. Okay, here's an even better view of Max Peak. And the most direct climber's approach is starting out on Max Canyon Road. Eventually, you leave Max Canyon Road at the upper group camp, and you get on a trail, and you end up on the left, ascending the slope on the left side of Max Peak, and then ascending the peak itself somewhere right around, I think it might be this band of green, which is, by the way, bristlecone pine, or it might be this band. Not totally sure. It's one of those two bands. You ascend that pretty precarious little ledge, and then you're on Max Peak. And then looking over this way, the Sisters, and Mummy's Head, and eventually, hopefully before the summer's out, we'll be heading up toward Mummy's Forehead, which is right over here. Mummy's Nose. We've got some great adventures on Las Vegas area trails, looking, ascending Mummy's Nose and then doing a 360-degree view from that amazing vantage point at the tip of Mummy's nose. And what else do we have here? That's pretty much it, but another thing, yeah, hopefully before the end of the summer, get my knee injury healed and we'll be ascending Max Peak. So there you have it, and onward, continuing on this Blue Tree loop, which looks like it's a fire road at this point, and you certainly need it. It's so dry up here. A lot of uh, fuel for a fire to spread, and there's a lot of wind up here. You could just lose the whole thing in a few hours. So here's the fire road. Aha, our first Joshua trees. Yeah, we're descending, getting lower in altitude and hotter. So this is where you see the very first Joshua trees. And at some point, maybe, before we turn and head back up the loop on the other side of Lee Canyon Road, which is below, right in this area, before we head back up Lee Canyon Road, maybe we'll be in a Joshua tree forest. I don't know if they get that thick on this loop, but if they do, we'll see it. We've been descending this fire road, the Blue Tree Loop Fire Road, and now we come up to another intersection. You can see there's a road crossing here, and I'm going to guess the downward leads to Lee Canyon Road. Upward would lead toward the Pinyon Pine Loop. Fortunately, there's a little cairn and a sign at this important junction that says, "Leave the roads and continue now on the Blue Tree Loop," which is now a trail. And here's something you don't see on the other Sawmill Loop trails in the system. A sign that just reminds you, yes, you are on the Blue Tree Loop. So I'm going to guess this is probably one of the most popular loops because it has some good markings along the way. So after that fire road stretch, we are now again on a beautiful little trail, lower Blue Tree Loop. Just to do a quick 360, there ahead is the Sheep Range. Good reference point. Down beyond Highway 95. Then over in this direction, you have the ridge that's across Lee Canyon Road. The base of the ridge is the Lee Canyon Narrows. And then here's our familiar reference point, Mummy's Head. So yeah, this stretch, much more beautiful than that wider fire road. But notice how the trees are getting smaller. We'll see how that continues as we descend. Approaching another intersection, let's see if we can make some sense of it. You can see there's a road crossing heading up in this direction. Unmarked, we don't know where that goes. Over here, it lets you know that, yes, we were on the Blue Tree Loop Trail. So since it's aimed towards someone coming up in this direction, I'm going to imagine Blue Tree Loop is down this way. So now we have another intersection here, and here's the trail sign. Yes, it says Blue Tree is up that way, the direction we came. So that means you would be on the Blue Tree when you saw this sign, which means you'd be coming from this direction. So let's imagine the Blue Tree Loop continues in this direction. And then here is a sign that is totally a mess. And it seems to be indicating, yes, you continue in this direction. Who knows where this sign was originally? I don't see any signpost. But that seems to confirm, yes, you head on this road. So we're going to do that and just see how it goes. My GPS is behind, so it's not helping. The app I'm using, it does have a topo map on it, so I just have to look at the terrain now, read the topo map, and look at the trail lines on that map and make my best guess. But my best guess is you continue now down this road after having made those two intersections up here. So here we go. And just a quick note, it looked like that last group of signs at that last intersection worked a lot better if you were heading on the Blue Tree Loop in a counterclockwise direction. We're going in the clockwise direction, and that intersection was a lot more confusing clockwise. So we'll see if there's some kind of sign that indicates we are on the Blue Tree Loop still. We don't know for sure, but I'm suspecting, based on all my reading of maps, that we are indeed on the Blue Tree Loop, which has again become a fire road. Well, here along the trail or road is a little version of a labyrinth. I guess you could walk this labyrinth, but it would be pretty short. Shortly after that labyrinth, another unmarked intersection and a road I don't even see on the map heading down to the right. No markings. Here's our little cairn. So I'm going to assume Blue Tree is continuing forward on this road. So let's continue onward. We've come down this fire road. I'll call it Blue Tree Loop Road. Now we're at another intersection, and fortunately this is well marked. There's a road crossing, indication Blue Tree Loop continues straight, and we are very close to the lower edge of the Blue Tree Loop. You can see where there's a little cairn across the way that indicates, yes, continue a little further past this intersection. And by the way, the intersection, though it is not on my map at least, is road 25833, Forest Road up in this direction. Probably another fire road. We don't know. Anyway, yeah, what we're going to do here is we are going to continue across this road and should be closing in on the lower end of the Blue Tree Loop, taking a right turn and heading to Lee Canyon Road, crossing Lee Canyon Road, and then down into the beautiful Lee Canyon Narrows. Another quick note at this intersection, it's beginning to become apparent that the Blue Tree Loop, at least on this side of the loop, on the west side of Lee Canyon Road, is marked better for the counterclockwise direction. You can see lots of markings here, where if you come to this side of the sign, there's a little blue tree loop arrow, but no, the main markings indicate counterclockwise. You're going to get better trail markings for the Blue Tree Loop. And again, we're doing the Blue Tree Loop in a clockwise direction. Okay, continuing forward. Now we go into a dip, up, another road intersection here. Maybe part of that last intersection. There you see Mummy's Head, Max Peak. And continuing ahead, we see a little cairn. I'm thinking this is Blue Tree Road, and this is where we head over to Lee Canyon Road, cross Lee Canyon Road, and then enter the Lee Canyon Narrows. And if I'm right, we'll end up crossing a trail split off to the left that is the one end of the Rocky Gorge Loop Trail. So let's just see if all that happens. And then, yeah, could get confusing around here. You don't know what's a road, what could be a trail, but I'm going to assume that yes, we head in this direction, circling around the lower end of the Blue Tree Loop toward Lee Canyon Road. So far, everything has been totally correct as far as directions. We've been on track, so let's see if that continues. Yeah, it looks like this area we're in is a place one could camp or just use as a trailhead. And in addition, it could create a different Blue Tree Loop experience if you started down at the bottom of the loop and you went uphill first toward Mummy's Head, the other end of the loop, the upper end, and then you could go downhill on the way back instead of downhill on the way as I've done and uphill on the way back. So hopefully we are approaching a trail split for the Rocky Gorge Loop Trail. There's the direction we just came from, and as I said, the signs are much better if you're traveling this loop in a counterclockwise direction. We have been traveling in a clockwise direction, and Lee Canyon Road is just up this road, which is Blue Tree Road. We'll be crossing Lee Canyon Road and heading down into Lee Canyon Narrows, which is right before that ridge that you see across Lee Canyon Road. Looking for the Rocky Gorge Trailhead for another adventure coming up. But as we are here at the low end of the Blue Tree Loop, just a few points of interest, reference points. There's Gas Peak over the upper end of Decatur Avenue in Las Vegas. Here is the Sheep Range. That's across Highway 95, the east side of that highway. And here's just a look at the lower end of the Blue Tree Loop. And if you wanted to start down here, you'd just park in this area. We'll go up to Lee Canyon Road in just a moment and see if there's a better parking spot there. But you could park on this end and then travel up the loop and then be downhill on the way back. And by the way, yes, here is Max Peak. The Sisters, Black Rock north and south. Black Rock's the closest. Mummy's Head. And Angel Peak. And wouldn't it be great if we can see that trailhead for the Rocky Gorge Loop, which we should be crossing before we hit Lee Canyon Road just ahead. Okay, from this lower end of the Blue Tree Loop, and we're looking up toward the upper end of the Blue Tree Loop, Mummy's Head, where the trailhead is. The question is, where is that Rocky Gorge trail for future reference? And I think I might have found something that is not marked, but this could be the trailhead for the Rocky Gorge Loop. If you were doing it in a clockwise direction. No, counterclockwise. That's a guess that I have for the Rocky Gorge Loop beginning in the counterclockwise direction. Now there is another sign just up a little ways here. And something that looks like it could be a faint trail stemming from that sign. The sign says start. So that's interesting. And it looks like this is used in some kind of running event. But yeah, here's a sign that says start point. But we don't know. We don't know if that's a running event or something else. And here's what looks like it could be a trail heading this direction. Anyway, we know Rocky Gorge Loop heads off in this direction, in the counterclockwise direction, and then circles around and then back on up, connecting with Pinyon Pine Loop and Blue Tree Loop. But, you know, here we are, close to Lee Canyon Road. Quite a devastation of tree stumps here. Who knows what that's all about. Anyway, there's another one of those little yellow signposts ahead. And I looked at it just a moment ago. It said smooth pace. So I don't know if that's what made me think those signposts are for some kind of running event. I know there is a running event in the spring in the Sawmill area, sponsored by Triple Dare. So maybe they come down this far. We don't know. But let's take a look at this little sign. We're almost at Lee Canyon Road here. About ready to make that crossing and descend into the beautiful Lee Canyon Narrows. But yeah, here's indicating, yes, we're still on the Blue Tree Loop, crossing Lee Canyon Road. So we've been perfectly on course. But look at this. Smooth pace, 100 meter. Now who knows what that is? Maybe it's a 100 meter. Yeah, I know that Red Rock Search and Rescue has 100 meter measurements for measuring the length of your stride. And it looks like from here to that other yellow sign, little post up ahead there, it might be about 100 meters. And if that's the case, maybe this is used to measure your pace. Who knows? But let's, for now, cross Lee Canyon Road and let's find where we descend into the Lee Canyon Narrows, which is just across this road. And here we go. Now the question is, where does the trail continue? There's something over here. I'm not sure if that's actually a trail, but let's find out. Okay, my map indicators seem to indicate that we go up this little road. Lee Canyon Road is beyond the end of this little strip. And at the end of this little strip, we should find the descent point, reconnection with the Blue Tree Loop, descending down into Lee Canyon Narrows. The ridge you see on the upper horizon is actually the ridge on the opposite side of Lee Canyon Narrows. So pretty significant wash. Okay, let's head up this little road, see if we can find a connector to the Blue Tree Loop, continuing in our clockwise, I guess backwards direction. Okay, here we are, the upper end of that little asphalt strip, and it looks like this is indeed some kind of trailhead. This could be a place to park if you want to start the Blue Tree Loop at its lower trailhead. Let's see. Oh, what do you know? Here's a sign. If you were wondering, this should clear up all doubt. Lower Blue Tree Loop Trailhead. Okay, very good. And I believe this then would be the point, and it's got an orange trail sign. So, but it's Blue Tree Loop, and the color code is normally blue. And here is the descent into Lee Canyon Narrows below. So yeah, things should get exciting from this point. And we'll be heading up the Narrows and looking for the point at which we leave the Narrows to hit the Sawmill Trailhead, which is the upper Blue Tree Trailhead. I guess the thing is, you cross Lee Canyon Road down where we crossed and then head up this little asphalt strip on the east side of the road. At the top of the strip, here is the trailhead and the descent point into Lee Canyon Narrows. Let's go. So you get the idea. Pretty dramatic descent into the Narrows, but how beautiful. We're going to descend into the wash and then head up the wash back to the Sawmill Trailhead. And here we are, having landed in the Lee Canyon Narrows wash. Blue tree is now officially orange, it looks like. Interesting. And you get into the wash and you just head up the trail. Let's see what kind of markings they have on the other side of this little sign. Yeah, there you go. So you know if you're heading down the wash, you're going in a counterclockwise direction on the Blue Tree Loop. You just know that there's an arrow pointing to the left. It doesn't say Blue Tree Loop, but yeah, that's how you stay on the Blue Tree Loop. And you take this, which becomes the ascent trail, ascending that ridge on the west side of the Narrows and up to Lee Canyon Road, which is above the ridge. So now it's a matter of continuing along the Lee Canyon Narrows wash. And just uniquely beautiful. Look at these Joshua trees. Pinyon Pine. It seems like much more of a desert landscape, upper desert, than where we started at Sawmill, which was more forested. This looks like just a really rugged landscape that's probably washed out now and then, and a lot of these plants need to start over. Okay, onward and upward. Now as we head up this wash, besides just enjoying the beauty of the wash, there are two things we want to watch for. One is the Deer Creek Catch Pen Loop connector, which is going to head up over the ridge on our left on the east side of the wash, and it's going to connect with the lower part of the Deer Creek Catch Pen Loop. Another thing to watch for is the exit to the Narrows below the Sawmill Trailhead area. That'll be off to the right. We don't want to miss that. I guess if we missed it, we would end up in Upper Lee Canyon eventually and in the ski area, but we'd be pretty tired by the time we got there. So we want to watch for those two loop connectors. Okay, here, another indicator. Stay on the trail. You know, where things are pretty obvious, you just stay in the wash and head upward. There are sure a lot of signs all of a sudden indicating which direction to go. Now let's see what we got here. Another sign. Aha! Okay, so the wash is not as simple as it seems. You could stay in the wash and just figure it out, but here it indicates turn left and take this little trail. See what it doesn't say anything on the other side of that post. So I imagine one of the values of the turn left or right as you go up the wash is just that there are areas in the wash that are just clogged with downed trees, and looks like they've charted out a little path that helps you weave around the obstacles in the wash. And then here we are with the next sign. saying, yes, you're going in the right direction. Continue on the Blue Tree Loop, which is, well, you know what? The Blue Tree Loop goes to the right. But notice this little marker that's indicating a left. This may be over here, the Deer Creek Catch Pen connector. Yeah, this really does look familiar as the Deer Creek Catch Pen connector trail. And you'd head up over this ridge and I think a couple other ridges, and then connect with the lower end of the Deer Creek Catch Pen Loop, take that loop up to its upper trailhead, and you'd be at the, well, near the base of Mummy's Nose. So, but you'd be on Deer Creek Road. Okay, onward. Okay, as we continue up in this direction, reminds me of stretch that I took. It was once I descended from the Deer Creek Catch Pen connector into this canyon and headed up in this way. I had started up on the upper end of that loop, and I was on where that loop connects with with Deer Creek Road. So I continued up in this direction for a ways and then decided, hey, I need to get up to Deer Creek Road. So I headed up a ridge to the left and then had quite the brutal ridge canyon experience up to where I ended at the desert overlook on Deer Creek Road, and then took a left and ended up on the Deer Creek Catch Pen Loop upper trailhead. So that's on the Deer Creek Catch Pen Loop West adventure on Las Vegas area trails. Quite a wilderness traverse. As you're continuing up the wash, there are places where you wonder, should I go to the left or to the right? It looks like it heads down this way. And if you make a wrong turn, yeah, you can end up in the middle of a whole lot of fallen brush that's a barrier. Fortunately, in this case, it looks pretty clear. This is the way, and then there is a cairn on the other side of the wash, and you can see looking down the main wash and up the main wash. Now, if you stay in the main wash and just think, hey, I'm gonna stay in the widest part, you could end up facing a brush barrier. So yeah, try to keep to the cairns and what trails you can find, and hopefully this will guide you. Yeah, I don't think it's that way. I think it's this way. Either way, you know, if you got lost in this wash and just too many barriers, which sometimes happens with me, you know that Lee Canyon Road is right up over that ridge, and that's a quick and easy escape. But we want to stay in the path of the Blue Tree Loop. You know, it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's a lot harder to find your trail and stay on a trail than it is to just navigate by the large reference points of ridges and peaks and gullies. So what I've done today is, yeah, we've stuck to this Blue Tree Loop trail and avoided any of the intersections that would lead us in a wrong direction. Here's another little wash crossing. You see the cairn, and then you look at the main wash here, but notice little trail continuing up on this side. So yeah, navigating the trail pretty much helps you weave around any obstacles in the wash. This is reminding me of part of the trail in Griffith's Shadow Loop in Level Canyon, where you have a whole lot of markers like this cairn that guide you through washes, helping you navigate around obstacles. The trail's pretty good in this wash. You just need to watch carefully where it seems to disappear. Stop, look around, and you're likely to find where the trail continues. This is a composite boulder. A lot of material washes down these canyons, and that material then hardens because there's a lot of calcium in the limestone. Limestone is part sea creature from shells from an ancient seabed millions of years ago, and the sea creatures fell to the bottom. They their shells dissolved and entered the mud, and that hardened, became limestone. Then you end up in a wash, and the wash becomes, creates its own frozen chunks of that limestone composite, and then those chunks break off and they continue on down the wash as composite boulders with many different pebbles and rocks fused together with that limestone glue. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff here as you look at the history of the area and how things came to be where they are. You can also see where, just imagine the flow of the water, where there is a bend and the water rushes against the side of a limestone ridge. That's where you're going to find the vertical areas. And you can even see layers in that limestone. But once again, that's all composite fused together. And then there are chunks of limestone. And this chunk right here looks like it's got some fossils, some of those seashells I was talking about. So a lot to look at, a lot of geological history. And yeah, I'm not a geologist, but there are a few things that you can piece together, and it's kind of fun to figure out how things came to be where they are. And it's dynamic, and they're continuing to move. Another crossing, another huge cairn. Why the cairns? Why go to all this trouble? Because that's got to endure beyond the next flood in order to let people know to make this crossing and continue on. And no little signpost is going to survive a good flood in this wash, but maybe that cairn well. Wow, look at this juniper. Juniper berries. It is just packed. Yeah, I hear they're bitter, but edible. But check it out before you start eating them. I don't want anyone writing me saying that they got really sick eating juniper berries. But I guess you can grind them into a paste, make a flour, make flour out of it and bread. Who knows? Juniper bread. That would be interesting. I bet that is bitter. You have to really spice it up. Okay, continuing upward up this amazing wash. Every corner I round brings surprising, beautiful views. Look at the Joshua tree, the lower wash. We're on the trail above the wash. And then, yeah, this is why I keep to recognizing those reference points. There's the familiar shape of Max Peak. So you can see how the wash is winding around and Max Peak appears in a different position depending on where you are in the wash. And Lee Canyon Road up above the ridge on this right side of the wash. And as we continue upward in this wash, or I should say above the wash on the east side of the wash, that's where the trail is. But as we continue ascending the wash, notice how the trees are again getting taller. There's a lot of water here. Even though you can see no water, there's water underground, and some of these trees have roots that extend up to 300 feet below the surface, where there is still running water in the wash, way below the wash. So here we go, descending again into the main wash. We're going to cross, and then we'll see what happens after that. But the trail's been very good. Even though there are no trail signs here, there are a lot of cairns, and there's really no place else to go. Just stay in the wash. Coming from this direction on the trail, continuing up the wash, and now we get a view of some reference points giving us added knowledge of where we are. There is Mummy's Nose, part of the Mummy's Head Formation. And then over to the right, that bald peak there, that's Charleston Peak. And the high point to the right of that is Lee Peak. So yeah, looking straight up Lee Canyon toward Lee Peak there. Of course, the wash is anything but straight, but you can at least set a direction. Okay, onward. Well, here's a cool little composite formation. As I mentioned, this whole canyon, the Lee Canyon Narrows, it's made up of composite rock. The walls are composite. The um, successive floods of pebbles, smaller debris, boulders have come down this wash and Over time, the walls become hardened composite, and the floods dig deeper, carving out the composite walls. And by the way, it's very hard to climb those because, like I mentioned, they are composite rock and very loose. So don't try to climb one of those vertical walls. And eventually, the area we're standing on will be dug even deeper, carved by the rushing water coming down from Lee Peak and the Upper Charleston Wilderness, and continuing to create more vertical composite rock walls on either side of the narrows here. Okay, continuing up the wash, we're by now in the upper area of the Lee Canyon Narrows, and I'd say maybe half mile, maybe a little less than a mile, and we will ascend the west side ridge there and cross over to the Sawmill Loop. But in the meantime, yeah, this continues to be just incredible. And the trail here is clearly defined. You're not going to get lost in the wash. You know, you stay in the narrows, but also it's easy to stay on this well-defined trail. Well, this feels like a kind of final ascent out of the wash. Could be a false alarm. My GPS went kind of dead. So yeah, look at this. Here's a Gamble's oak. Anyway, yeah, just came up out of the wash, continuing upward. We'll see if we circle around up and out or if we dive back down and we're just bypassing some real brushy areas below us. I don't know exactly where I am, but I do know I'm on the right route. Yeah, we have ascended almost to Lee Canyon Road, at least that elevation. But this was not an ascent out of the wash, I don't think. I think it was a bypass of the narrows down below. I imagine there are some impassable areas where it looks so very narrow down below us. Okay, onward. Yeah, look at that narrow section below. There's probably no way the trail could have stayed down there and made it through those rocky channels. And as you look at it more closely, composite rock that's been um, that has been washed down, become sediment, and then frozen, and then another channel has The successive floods have carved it even deeper down to this narrow section. Wow. Okay, continuing onward. And look how steep the walls rise on the opposite side. Wow, this is really the narrows of the narrows. And over the next height, a spectacular view of our reference point, Mummy's Head. The narrows below. We'll see how far down we descend now. And Lee Canyon Road just above us. But we have further to go. And here's another look at where the narrows becomes a very narrow slot canyon. This is what we bypassed by ascending to where we are now. Wow, look at that. And here we are having descended again into the wash after ascending to bypass the narrows down in that direction. Continuing onward. Lesson for today: do not drive your car down in this wash. This looks like something from the 1940s. Wow, this has been here a long time. Now that's amazing. And it may have actually been washed down from above in a very violent flood. And it looks like a scene from The Godfather, complete with bullet holes. Who knows what happened here? And maybe it was just used for target practice. And these bullet holes didn't occur while someone was driving. Well, I think the trail's finally taking us to the final ascent out of the cabin, out of the canyon. This is the direction I just came from. And you can see where we're continuing to wind upward now toward Lee Canyon Road, I believe. I could be wrong once again, but I'm thinking that's what's happening now. One last look at the canyon below and our main reference point, Mummy's Head. And now we continue to ascend toward Lee Canyon Road and the Sawmill Trailhead. And a look down the narrows and to the sheep range beyond. As we continue to ascend toward Lee Canyon Road. And here we are topping the canyon. You can see the sheep range in the distance. 103 degrees in Centennial Hills area of the Las Vegas Valley, which is the upper valley in Las Vegas. Probably 108 to 110 degrees in Henderson, and yet nice breeze, very comfortable today. So that may give you a gauge as to when you can do this loop based on the temperature in the Las Vegas Valley, wherever you happen to be. And here we are, Lee Canyon Road. We're going to cross the road and then find the Sawmill Trailhead, continue to our starting point, the upper trailhead. And this, having just crossed Lee Canyon Road, should take us to the lower equestrian trailhead area, from which we will ascend to the upper area, which is only about 50 yards, 1,000 feet maybe. Sign letting us know where we continue the Blue Tree Loop. This sign's letting us know the direction of the trailhead. And here's one of the final trail splits. If I were to take a left here, I'd end up at the equestrian trailhead, which is right down in this direction. A right is going to take us toward the Sawmill Trail and and you can see the signs here. That helps too. Yellow is Sawmill, blue is Blue Tree. And this will put us back on the Sawmill Loop and to the upper Sawmill Trailhead, which is for the picnickers and hikers and where I started. And the final turn is a left turn that'll take us to the upper Sawmill Trailhead. This is where we were earlier when we took the Blue Tree Loop in a clockwise direction. Earlier today we headed up in that direction, counterclockwise direction, and across Lee Canyon Road and into the Narrows this direction. So there you have it, the Blue Tree Loop. Now it's an easy jog back to the Sawmill Trailhead. And here we are, last little turn to the Sawmill Trailhead. And this concludes the Blue Tree Loop. Awesome loop. Now it's great on my knee. So it's a good injury recovery loop as far as I'm concerned. Feeling great. And by the way, the final distance 8 miles on the nose. And I would recommend this as a great trail. Blue Tree Loop, great running trail. Beautiful setting, surface, beautiful, nice gradual inclines.